So what do you do when you feel like you haven't had a good performance? And what do you do when maybe you have a child or a student who feels like they haven't had a good performance? In some cases, it's enough to just say, well, I thought you played really well, especially for younger children. That strategy can work sometimes, but many times, and I found, especially with students who are a little more intuitive or more intelligent, saying something to them like, "Oh, I thought you did really well," and trying to make them feel better in that way, it can do more harm than good. What do you say to someone in this situation, or what do you say to yourself in this situation? If you've never been on stage, you've never performed, uh, it's tough. It can be really hard sometimes, and it's hard to explain to people what it feels like being up there because it's a very unique experience performing on stage. On the one hand, you're doing something that's very difficult. It takes tremendous motor control. It's something you've worked at for months or years. And on the other hand, it's something that's very personal, that's very sensitive. You're really kind of bearing your soul, and there are people watching. And if you feel like you played poorly, it can be a very tremendously bad feeling. And this goes for anything. It's the same thing, of course, in sports or whatnot. But I think in the arts, it can really be amplified because not only do you feel like you did poorly at something you worked at, but you feel like you failed at communicating something that might have been, had a lot of depth and meaning to you, and that can be a very hard thing. So how do you deal with that? And if you have students or children, what do you tell them in these circumstances? I can tell you what I was always told as a child, and this wasn't. I'm not trying to put down my parents or my teachers, but I can tell you how it was often dealt with for me and why I don't think that was too effective. And the way it was often dealt with for me was basically what you hear a lot of times, which is something to the effect of, I feel that you played well, or to me, I didn't hear any wrong notes. You did a really good job. Now, it's good to hear that. If you play poorly, it would be a lie to say it's not good to hear from someone, oh, I thought it went pretty well. But I think past a certain point, especially if you're far enough in your development as a child, a child can tell, and you can tell yourself when someone's lying to you or when someone's just trying to make you feel better. Maybe it's not even lying, maybe you really do think that someone played well. I've had students, especially really gifted students, who I think did a good job, and they will themselves think, I did horribly, or just I'm very unhappy with how I played. So past a certain point, I think that hearing something along the lines of, I thought you did well, or you should feel good about that, is in a sense invalidating that person's emotions. You're basically saying to them, I know how you think you did, I know what you think your judgment of this is, but I want you to just kind of throw all that out the window and take my judgment instead. And you can see why past a certain point, or really if it's taken that way, it actually can do more harm than good. I remember as a child, once I was kind of smart enough to be self-aware, when someone would say that to me, I always knew that they were being fake. And even if I didn't think they were being fake, I knew that myself, I didn't feel that way. And so it really wasn't helpful, and then could even be kind of annoying to hear it. So I want to tell you what I will often say to students, and I say this to students not because I'm trying to sugarcoat things, but because I think it's true, and I think it's probably a healthy way to deal with this. So, of course, this is all in the context of your student or your child understanding that you support them and that you care about them and love them. So I'm not trying to give the impression that you should be harsh, but what I will normally say is something along the lines of, I really respect how you feel. I've been there. I've felt like I've performed poorly or played poorly, and I know how bad that feels, and I respect that completely. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing that you feel that way. I don't think that that's a bad thing, because that's part of what it is to try very hard at something, and that's part of what it is to be in the arts, to be an artist, to be a performer, is to feel that way sometimes. And you will feel that way again in the future But it's important to understand that that's not a reflection on you as a person. That's not a reflection on your self-worth. That's just your judgment of how you played. And while I may think that you played well, what's really important is how you feel that you played, how you feel that you did. And sometimes even the very best performers will feel, and sometimes often will feel, I didn't really play my best there. I didn't do a good job. And that doesn't mean that they're bad performers or bad people. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad performer or a bad person. It just is part of being an artist. It's part of being a musician, is that sometimes you feel that way. So that's how I deal with it, because I think it's the truth. I think it is part of being a musician. And it doesn't reflect negatively on you, the person. If you've worked hard at what you're trying to do, sometimes you still will hit roadblocks. Sometimes things will not go as well as you want. And part of being alive and part of being in the arts is that you just keep going. If you didn't ever feel that way, it would mean you weren't really putting yourself on the line. So that's how I deal with it. I hope that made some sense. And I think that you can see that there's a difference, because it really doesn't try to invalidate how that person thinks they did and how they feel about how they did, which of course are two separate things. And it puts the control in their hands. It basically says to them, hey, it's okay that I feel this way. It's okay that I feel crummy about how I played. And that doesn't necessarily mean I'm a bad person. And I think that if a child can internalize that, and if we can internalize that as adults, it gives us the power to keep going in the face of these obstacles, so that we don't feel like, oh, just because that one thing went poorly, therefore I'm not a good musician, or I'll never be good, or I should just give up. Instead, it's more like, gosh, that really feels bad, but it's okay that that feels bad, and I might even feel that way again in the future. But if I work hard, there are going to be some times where I think I did a really good job. You know, there are going to be some payoffs to this, and I have to have some acceptance around that this is just part of what it is to be a musician. So I'd love to hear your comments on this. Let me know in the comment section below. This is how I address the issue, and it can be a really sensitive and a tough one to address. It's basically compassion and support and love, but also not invalidating the person's own judgment and acceptance of, you know, what it is to do that in the real world. Of course, in language and terminology that would be appropriate. I would never talk to, say, a 4-year-old like this, but I have talked to some very brilliant 10, 11, 12-year-olds like this, and I think it's effective. And I've tried to talk to myself like this too. So leave a comment below, visit me at pianoblog.com, and of course if you like these videos, subscribe, because I'm posting them almost every day. I'll see you next time.